We have some breaking news to report. Inflation has hit a 40-year high in June at 9.1%, up from 8.6% last month. While Biden said this is unacceptably high and data is out of date, he added that he will give the Fed the room it needs to fight inflation. Reports say the Federal Reserve will likely deliver an even bigger interest rate hike later this month, which could squeeze consumers even tighter.
Groceries saw the biggest hike in prices at 12%. Chicken is up 19% in the past year, the biggest increase ever, while gas is up 60%. Electricity has also gone up 14%, and rent, of course, is up nearly 6%.
Not good. Not good. People need chicken to live.
Well, look, I was also just, I was scrolling through the internet looking at this trending topic, and I saw one commentator who said we need to also change our language around this. This passive voice that is often used for police shootings. So, civilian was shot, without
was
talking about
become
who.
dead.
This is also true that landlords are raising rent. It's not that rents go up randomly. There is some aspect of this. It's not entirely attributed to this, but some aspect of this is price gouging. I saw that Costco put out a tweet. Someone asked, "Are you going to raise the price of hot dogs?" And they responded with one word, "No." And people were celebrating. Costco is stronger than inflation, and it's because a lot of these industries are still experiencing huge profit, if not record profit, and are still choosing instead to raise prices and further gouge profit and use the fact of inflation as an excuse to charge more for goods.
I don't know if landlords are experiencing historic earnings or something like that. They're probably raising your rent because the cost of everything for them goes up. So they raise. I mean, this is the whole system works.
That is the thing. The costs do go up, but the cost of living for us are not going up proportionally to the costs that are actually being incurred by these people. So, for example, I believe the price of rent in New York has gone up something like, I don't want to misrepresent, but it's huge. It's like 20%. It's not the kinds of costs that would be built in with gas prices and oil or construction prices and those kinds of things. And anybody who lives in New York knows that your landlords aren't exactly spending a lot on construction and upkeep of these apartments that basically look like the tenements from the 1930s.
Sounds like a miserable, I repeat again, sounds like a miserable place to live. I don't know why anyone would want to live there. Go elsewhere. It's a big country. It's a big country with affordable places to live if you look outside New York.
But that is also not true. Statistic after statistic shows you that if you work a minimum wage salary anywhere in the United States, in Mississippi, in West Virginia, a 40-hour-a-week minimum wage salary earning full-time means you cannot afford a two-bedroom apartment anywhere. Yes, you have to
need a roommate
You need to start getting the Murphy bed. And this is not because of something that has happened in the last year. This is because even though prices have gone up even before this inflation crisis, wages have not gone up. A minimum wage, we haven't had a minimum wage raise. I say this until I'm red in the face. Since 2009, it's the longest period in American history without a wage. And what's the response of our government? To say that the problem somehow is that wages are too high and supply is too high without looking to things like the war in Ukraine, what that has done to energy prices, and how those energy prices have caused prices of other kinds of goods and services to raise around the world.
And to the extent there's any root cause here, I'm throwing my pen. I'm furious. There's a number of causes, but that is the big one, and that is a policy failure. Yeah. The U.S. government is pursuing this. We talked about this yesterday, I think. As long as it takes is what Joe Biden said is his policy for continuing this. Again, it's not solely on the U.S., obviously, to snap our fingers and say that the war's over. Russia is invading the country and is going to take some of the land of the country, but we're never going to defeat Russia. I saw a tweet from Bill Kristol, a famous neoconservative commentator. She said straightforward that all these things would happen, including the defeat of Russia. Ukraine will defeat Russia, and then everything will be fine. That's not going to happen. Yeah. And our commitment to that is screwing up our economy, our entire country. The people don't want it. They're fed up with it. Are the sanctions, what we did to deter Russia didn't work. They reaped actually record profits from doing exports.
The ruble's strong.
It's not working. Yeah. It's just hurting us, and that is. But Biden is committed to this. He's reiterated his commitment to this policy that is probably one of the bigger factors for what we're dealing with right now. Obviously, supply chains were a little janky before this.
And the supply chains are part of that. I don't want to brush that aside. People are making the point also that high inflation is global. So to the extent that anyone wants to attribute it to things specifically Joe Biden can do, well, I think Joe Biden should do a lot more, because people in other countries aren't necessarily suffering the effects of inflation in the same way, because despite inflation, they still have, healthcare, affordable education, things we don't have in this country that make it easier to weather the storm. However, you have to look at these global inflation numbers with, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% all across the world, and understand that you do have to talk about COVID and some of these supply chain issues that have come up, and particularly in the United States, the choice to offshore so much of our manufacturing so that we're hit harder by these kinds of things. And of course, we can't forget the price gouging aspect of it. I saw Bernie Sanders was tweeting about Amazon on Prime Day, complaining, Jeff Bezos complaining about he blamed inflation on a 17% price hike in Prime membership after its profits soared 450%. So they raised the cost of a Prime membership by 17%, passed that on to the consumer. At the same time that Amazon, the company, soared in profits by 450% to a record $38 billion, all while avoiding $5 billion in taxes and spending $4 million on union busting and denying workers paid sick leave.
There's no greater gulf in our opinions than when we talk about Amazon stuff. I don't care. Good for them. It's the greatest company that's ever lived. It's mastered the art of efficiently meeting human need, and they're better organized and more efficiently run than any other organization, certainly than our government.
Efficiently run at whose expense? Maybe you can afford, Robbie, to pay 17% more.
If you can't afford Amazon, you don't have to pay it. It's voluntary.
The thing. We live in a country where we have decided that we have companies like Amazon taking over much of our infrastructure, they have a grocery business, they control the publishing business. You can't publish a book, you can't succeed in commerce and have a business without having a good relationship with Amazon. We cannot sit here and pretend.
Doesn't hurt the consumers.
But wait a minute, Robbie. We talk about Twitter, which is a private company and they can do what they want. We talk about Facebook. It's a private company. We can do what we want. No, we understand that at a certain point, these companies have gotten so large that they constructively are public forums. And we need to have rules and regulations going on there and keep our eye out for the fact that they can have the same kind of despotic control over our lives that the government can have, even if they are not technically the government. And I don't know how you can look at monopolistic companies like Amazon and not see that same threat there.
A lot of vibes there, to borrow a Brianna phrase.
It's not
what they have mostly done is not wielded despotic power, but vastly expanded the capacity to engage in all the things you just discussed. They have expanded my ability to shop, to buy things, to purchase books. They have expanded all of these domains. They have not constricted them.
That's said like an affluent consumer and not like a person who has a business or who is participating in the market.
No, I'm talking about consumers. We're all consumers. We're not all business owners, but we're all consumers.
You don't think it's despotic to have this relationship between these Amazon home devices?
I don't think we need it. We can't have our entire policy can't be to keep the corner store in business. It's like that's Luddite behavior.
We're not talking about the corner store. We're talking about the anti-monopolistic principles that this country was founded on, and that their founding fathers very much understood were a problem to actually having competitive enterprises that inure to the benefit of the consumer. Having monopolies is never good for a consumer, especially when they're so big and so large that they are partnering with police departments to get surveillance data from your Amazon home device on your front door. They have drones flying past.
People keep saying it's not good, but it seems in fact good. Well, what Amazon delivers us seems to be good.
Well,
and most people think it's good, and most people use it.
You're a person who doesn't necessarily see the threat of even having the chips installed into your hands to scan in and out of Amazon stores. Where there is, you're right.
Here's the trade-off I'll make for you. Here's what I'll do for you. We should no subsidies, no favorable tax whatevers. When the red carpet was rolled out for Amazon so they could headquarter in DC or across the river, and they've renamed the whole place. Yes, ridiculous. None of that. I don't want any favoritism. I don't want any special favors. That is the domain of Amazon in which I am most concerned. Their ability to buy legislators or say, oh yeah, we might do something here if you kind of change the package to be more favorable to us. That's wrong. There's none of that. I'm against all of that, etc. We were yelling at each other a minute ago, but I take seriously the concerns to publishing, to free speech. I have been very critical of Amazon's policies on a lot of these fronts. I think they deserve criticism for them. I'm not being myopic saying there's no benefit or there's no downside to any of this stuff, but there is also considerable benefit.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul has signed legislation that will require gun owners in the state who apply for a concealed carry permit to register their current and former social media accounts from the last 3 years. But it doesn't specify if they will be required to provide access to private accounts as well. The law is expected to begin starting in September.
My colleague at Reason, associate editor of that magazine, Liz Wolfe, is back to discuss this policy. Thanks for joining us, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
And my expectation is that this will horrify you just as it horrifies me. And look, I understand, I understand it. I don't agree with it. There's a lot of, particularly from the New York governor, of complaining and blaming social media in the wake of the Buffalo shooting, and et cetera. That's a thing politicians often go to, say, oh, well, what can we blame other than just like the shooter, right? Oh, well, maybe it was social media in the same way it was violent video games, and it was comic books, or it was Satanism, or whatever it is. Now it's social media, and fair enough, you often find extremist content on social media, and sometimes you find that there were certain warning signs, but what do you make of a measure to broadly force people to give up some of their privacy and their civil liberties just to exercise their Second Amendment rights?
Well, your Second Amendment rights should not be contingent on how you exercise your First Amendment rights. To me, this is quite obvious. Apparently to Governor Hochul, it's not. I think it's really concerning. What we see in the cases of Buffalo and in the cases of the Highland Park shooting is a failure of red flag laws that are already on the books to actually work as intended. The fact that politicians like Hochul are now in the business of passing a bunch of new laws as opposed to actually examining why the existing laws failed, to me indicates a total unseriousness. It indicates virtue signaling. It indicates that they want to get reelected or want to have future careers in politics, but it does not actually do very much to solve this problem. And I'm frankly worried that this measure doesn't even pass constitutional muster. How would this work? The places where we see these shooters talking about their motives and giving warning signs of their plans, we see them on 4chan, we see them on Reddit. These are anonymous accounts that they would not voluntarily turn over. So I think whoever crafted this proposal has thought about it for about 5 seconds.
Right. Handing over your LinkedIn account is not really going to make much difference, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, all right, so here I realize I'm outnumbered by blonde libertarians, but here's going to be my sort of counter proposal, or my question, I guess, for you, Liz, and for you, Robbie. With abortion, it's very clear, I think, to most conservatives that the thing that makes abortion different from other constitutional rights is that there's a third party involved, right? There's a baby, a fetus, right? There's a life. Another life there that has to be taken into account. It's not just about the woman. It's not just about the mother. And to me, I don't understand how that can't be applied as well to the Second Amendment to say, look, you have a right to own a gun. But guns can kill people. There is another life potentially involved, and many other lives potentially involved in the case of mass shooters. And we do know that they leave these sort of social media trails. So on the one hand, I do hear the First Amendment argument, but on the other hand, we've understood that with Roe, because there is that tension, there is another life, but there is the woman's right to her bodily autonomy. We've decided that the best way to handle that tension between two competing sets of rights is to give it back to the states. And so to me, I don't understand why we couldn't say the same thing about this. Look, we're giving it back to the states. They should get to make their decisions. And yes, you have a constitutional right to own a firearm, but individual states can say, because there is potentially another life involved, we feel that it is okay to put conditions on that. And one of those conditions should be, we're going to look at this from the point of view of, are there any red flags on your social media?
My thought with that is that we do prosecute things when another life is taken, when another life is involved. And that's sort of the point at which our laws become, enforced here. But in terms of your actual ability to own a gun or to carry it nonviolently without hurting another person, to me, allowing the state to intervene and to step in there is a bridge too far. I understand what you're saying, though, of we legitimately do have a massive gun violence problem in this country. And I think it feels highly disturbing and unsettling that we seem to try to tackle it in all different states. And we want them to work like laboratories of democracy, right? We want different states to experiment with different laws to attempt to solve this really, really severe problem. The thing I keep coming back to is that we have existing laws on the books that we're not actually examining why they don't work. And then we even have situations like the Uvalde shooting, which was absolutely tragic, where that police department did not cover themselves in glory. And what I really want is for them to be held accountable. And I really fear that that's not what's going to happen. So I see there being so many different steps that we could all agree on that we could do first to attempt to crack down on gun violence.
Critics of New York Governor Kathy Hochul say she is dragging her feet on a promised probe into her former boss, ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, Hochul initially said she would get to the bottom of Cuomo's disastrous pandemic nursing home policy. However, according to the Gotham Gazette, Hochul has yet to appoint any investigators or even seek proposals from outside consultants.
Hochul has just been confirmed as the Democratic nominee for governor in November's election, receiving almost 70% of her party's votes in the primary. The governor's critics speculate that her slow moves on the Cuomo investigation are linked to the upcoming election. State Assemblyman from New York, Ron Kemp, has been on this story since the early days of the pandemic. He's here with us to discuss these latest developments. Welcome to Rising.
Thank you for having me back on.
So help remind us exactly what Cuomo needs to be investigated for. I think it has receded into the memory banks of a lot of the craziness that was 2020. You know, what should we be focused on right now?
Well, in the middle of a pandemic, the former governor chased down a $5.1 million book deal as he purposely suppressed life and death toll numbers around nursing homes. For months, lawmakers pushed for the truth and transparency, but they kept gaslighting us and the public from getting the truth about how many people died in this facility so we can make better decisions in the middle of the pandemic. But we need a thorough investigation as to why he did this, why he gave near blanket legal immunity to his top donors, why he chose to protect industry profits over saving people's lives in the middle of a pandemic.
And what's the accusation then, the alleged link between Hochul dragging her feet on pursuing this investigation and her own upcoming election?
I mean, one can surmise that the same people that funded the former governor's campaigns or the same stakeholders who are funding the current governor. Nothing has changed in terms of the power structure in places like Albany. The nursing home syndicate, the hospital, the insurance, the private equity money that comes through Albany, they're the ones that are in control of places like the state capital of New York. So Governor Hochul is still protecting those interests when she had promised when she took office to deliver for the families and victims, and we continue to hold her accountable for those promises.
And she has said, there was some reporting that, we're getting outside investigators, consultants, et cetera, it suggested we're putting together this kind of team, was applauded for doing so. That was a while ago. But my understanding is nothing of the sort is actually really happening. Can you, talk to us about that? Are we missing something? Is there actually an investigation underway? It doesn't seem like it.
No, it certainly doesn't seem like it at all. The state controller validated just a couple of weeks ago there has been no communication by the executive, which would have begun some sort of an outside investigation. But that in itself is also a misleading path toward getting the transparency. We already consulted outside groups like McKinsey to come in and write audits and reports in 2020, which absolved the Department of Health and any of the state government of any wrongdoings. We want a bipartisan, independent commission with full subpoena power to get to the bottom of why we did this, who made mistakes, and who should be held accountable. This is the only way we can learn from the mistakes so we don't repeat them moving forward and give closure to the thousands of grieving families that felt like they lost their loved ones due to bad policies.